a place where people value freedom. I also value freedom a lot. I even stay at my hotel on the Freedom Square, right? And today we're going to talk about morality and freedom from the perspective of Ayn Rand's philosophy. Now I have to ask these questions. How many of you have read something by Ayn Rand? Okay, so we have some people. For those who don't know, Ayn Rand was a novelist. She was born in 1905 in Tsarist Russia before the Communist Revolution. She moved to the United States when she was 21 years old. Then she started writing her fiction, plays, novelettes, of course, her novels such as The Fountainhead or Atlas Shrugged, which I think are her most famous novels. But after the publication of Atlas Shrugged in 1957, she started writing essays on philosophy and on applying her philosophy to politics, to cultural issues and stuff. So as I said, I was very happy that I would come to a place where people value freedom. I value freedom, and Ayn Rand valued freedom as well. Because it seems like freedom is something obvious, isn't it? Well, it's not. Not from Rand's perspective. For Rand, freedom is not obvious. Freedom is not a starting point. Freedom has some conditions, some requirements. And you can easily see why it's not obvious. Because there are a lot of people, a lot of ideologies that plainly reject freedom. There are nationalists, there are communists, they are the advocates of the welfare state, and they all reject political freedom. So freedom is not obvious. And the first question that we need to ask ourselves is, why do they reject it? Why do they reject it, something that we think should be valued so much? And the answer lies in something more fundamental. It's because they accept some premise, some ethical premise that is against freedom. And the premise is the premise of ethics of self-sacrifice. A premise that says that it's good to sacrifice either ourselves or other people for some greater good. And again, we can see that in nationalism. Nationalists would say, sacrifice for your nation. Communists will say, sacrifice for your class. And other people as well. The welfare statists will say, sacrifice for the poor, sacrifice for the needy. For those of you who have read Atlas Shrugged, you might think about the equalization of opportunity bill. The ethical premise there was the same, that we need to sacrifice other people for the so-called common good. And so freedom isn't obvious. It's not an axiom. It's not a starting point. We need to get to freedom. So the next question is, how do we defend freedom? What do we have to do in order to have a clear path towards accepting freedom and liberty? Well, we need to reject the fundamental ethical premise that is being held by all those people and ideologies that reject freedom, which is the ethics of self-sacrifice. So how do we do that? by accepting another premise, another fundamental ethical premise, which is the premise that we are allowed to live for ourselves, that we are allowed to live for our self-interest. So in short, Rand claims we need to accept the ethics of self-interest. Now, what is the ethics of self-interest? For Ayn Rand, the most fundamental value should be your life. You should be concerned with your own values, which is your goals, your careers, whether you'd like to be a musician, a businessman, a speaker, a writer, or whatever else you'd like to choose in terms of your productive career. It is your loved ones, your romantic partner, your colleagues, your friends, it can be your family. These are all your values. And the ethics of self-interest tells you to pursue those values instead of giving them up, instead of sacrificing yourself for something else, whether your nation, your society, the poor. Well, another example that I think you will be familiar with is some Russians hold that their soldiers should die for Mother Russia, right? They even say, some propagandists in Russia say that life is overrated, so just die. Die on the front. Also for Rand, self-interest, ethics of self-interest, it doesn't mean that you are supposed to use other people. Other people can be of great value to you, and I have already mentioned your loved ones, your partners, in business, in personal life. What matters is that you create values, material values, spiritual values. It can be anything. So what is the connection between the ethics of self-interest and political freedom? The connection is this. Once we accept the premise of ethics of self-interest, we can see that what we need in order to thrive, in order to flourish in a society, we need individual rights. We need individual rights as the basis for a rational and free society, a society that allows us to pursue our values, our goals, whether, again, we'd like to become musicians, we'd like to hang out with those people and not with that person, etc. We need individual rights in order to defend our choices, our freedom. Because if we don't have individual rights, then anything goes. The state, the government can do anything it wants. And it will usually justify it in terms of defending the common good or whatever else they might choose, like your nation, your class, other people. And so the government must not violate our rights. It should be based on the principle of protecting individual rights, because we need them in order to be able to pursue our own interests. And so one of the implications of that is that the government must not interfere with our lives. It must not interfere with economy, with businesses, with our choices. Its only job is to protect the individual rights of its citizens. But that's the connection. That's the connection. In order to argue for freedom, for political freedom, you need something more fundamental. You need the ethics of self-interest. And only once you have it, you can argue for individual rights, which are really political implementation or implementations of that ethics. Without it, you can't really argue for freedom in the long term. You can't really fight for freedom if you're at the same time advocating some form of ethics of self-sacrifice. So in the absence of ethics of self-interest, again, people will argue that you have to sacrifice for your nation, or that you have to sacrifice for your politicians, or your country, or your society, your class, etc. So political freedom, I think, requires a radical cultural change. Change in the way people think about morality. Right? Between morality and freedom. That's the title. It's because you need to start with morality and get rid of false premises in order to get to political freedom. And if you're interested how Rand's philosophy can be applied to your personal life, but also to politics, I encourage you to read her novels. Apart from the non-fiction, her novels such as The Fountainhead or Atlas Shrugged. Thank you. So now we have time for Q&A, but please make it questions, not long statements. And if you don't mind, I would like to continue walking on the stage. Do we have water, maybe?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
I'll pour it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So questions don't have to be about my talk. It can be about Rand's philosophy in general.
Hi, I'm Sandra.
Hi.
I wanted to know about Rand's life when she left the Soviet Union, or well, it wasn't Soviet Union yet.
It was.
Yeah?
It was, yeah.
Then it was, yeah. So when she left, do you think her arrival in America and clash with new values was the reason for this philosophy?
Oh,
It was like kind of reaction, counter-reaction to the socialist, collectivist thinking, way of thinking?
Yeah.
Or what has triggered this?
Yeah. I think from a very early age, Rand was an active thinker. She actually decided that she would like to be a novelist when she was 9 years old. And when she was about 13 years old, when the Bolshevik Revolution started, and we know that she knew that it's wrong. She had some implicit, not maybe conceptualized view of freedom, that freedom is something good. Of course, it took years and years to formulate an explicit philosophical system on which she had been working on for years. And so when she was moving to the States, she knew that she wants to go to a place where freedom is valued. But actually what she encountered, and that was she was shocked, that there was, because again, it was 1920s. And a lot of people didn't know what was going on in Soviet Russia. Some people in the US thought this is actually a great system. And so she encountered, so even though she moved to a place where people, to some extent, hold freedom very dearly, she was shocked to learn that a lot of people don't understand what's wrong with Soviet Russia and what's wrong with those ideas. But again, I would say that her views, that she formulated, her early views before she left, I think that obviously communism in Russia had some impact. But then again, it took years and years of thinking and reading and writing for her to develop her whole philosophical system. Don't be shy. There are no stupid questions. There are only stupid answers.
Okay.
Hi.
What is freedom?
Yeah, what is freedom? It's a very good question because Ayn Rand has never formally defined freedom. But in the case of her philosophy, when we think about freedom, we think about a free society. So for Rand, free society is a society that recognizes and protects individual rights. And that for her implies that there's a government whose only job is to protect those rights. Now, she defined rights as principles that define and sanction freedom of action in a society, in a social context, right? So, right. So again, right is a principle that defines and sanctions freedom of action. So I would.
There is no freedom of action, absolute freedom of action.
No. So what she meant by that is that for Ayn Rand, human beings have certain nature. And that nature requires certain values, certain principles that we need to follow if we want to be happy, if we want to thrive, or if we want to flourish, or whatever term you'd like to use. Now, she thinks that there are also certain requirements that are determined by our nature to live in a society in a rational way, in a rational that is consistent with our nature. And what rights are doing is that they are recognizing those requirements that our nature imposes, if you will. And once we have that, once we have recognized them, the government's role is to protect them. So, and she actually lists those rights, such as the most fundamental right is the right to life. So you have the right to take actions to preserve your life, but also to, you might say, make it better, just flourish. And you have the derivative rights, such as the right to freedom, for example, that you want to be with that person, or you want to work as a musician or whatever else. You have the right to property, and you have the right to the pursuit of happiness. And these are more fundamental rights. And so the freedom of action that she talks about is the freedom to take those actions that are good for your life. So in this sense, it's limited. Now, of course, she says that individual rights do not impose any obligations towards other people. So from the fact that I have the right to property, it doesn't mean that you are that you have to give me your house or your money. The only thing that you have to do is to abstain from violating my rights. Because that's the only way that we can have a rational society. A rational society is a society in which the physical force, the use of physical force is barred from it. And by the way, that is why she thinks that we need one objective law and a government.
Yes, she was many times telling that we should live by ourselves, we should live for ourselves.
Yeah.
Her philosophy, it seems to me, is a bit egoistic, and we should not sacrifice for others, but it is our freedom of choice. If I want to sacrifice, then why not?
Politically, yeah.
No one should force me.
Yes.
Then when I read her interview, it appears that she had a very young boyfriend and she was paying for him, but she's always advising us not to do, not give your things to
Oh,
others.
okay, I see.
And the second one, what I didn't like for her interview when I was reading, she was asked that about parents, and she answered that she even does not know whether they are alive or not.
Yeah. So here, okay.
Freedom?
Okay, so here, okay, so these are two questions. So the first question is, Ayn Rand says that you should pursue your values, that you should protect your values. But other people can be of great value to you. There's my wife. She's my top value. I would kill for her. I would defend her with my life because she's my top value. And by the way, Rand's husband was her top value as well. So other people can be so. Getting more technical now, in her ethics, she says that we should all have our hierarchy of values. So like, for example, you have some close friends and some more distant friends. So your close friends are higher in your hierarchy, right? They are bigger values for you, right? But they are your values. So other people can be your values.
Same I'm telling. When I value so much my country, why I should not die and why I should not sacrifice.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, that's another question, and it's a very good one. If you are protecting your country because you want to protect the freedom of this country, that is by all means rational, right? But there are people who have the mentality that it doesn't matter if my country is free, if my country is worthy of being protected. It's my duty. So they are thinking in terms of duties, not in terms of values. So for example, there's the war in Ukraine now. Some Ukrainians choose to leave. They become refugees. They go to Poland, to Germany, to Georgia as well. And it might be that they do so because they don't value their country. And I don't know their reasons. There might be some. But my point is, it's not their duty to fight for something that they don't value. But if you value your country, if it's a country that is at least semi-free, like Georgia, Poland, Ukraine, the US, then by all means you can do that. Yeah, it's not. So from this perspective, it's not a sacrifice. Rand defines sacrifice as choosing a lesser value over a greater one. So let me give you a good example. Let's say that there are 3 women that I see on the street who need help. But at the same time, my wife needs help. If I choose those women to help them, instead of my wife, I'm sacrificing my.
Never do this.
No, I know, but yeah, of course, it's which.
Everyone does, I think.
Sure, there are philosophers who would argue that that's what you are supposed to do.
Only Buddhism is telling that, okay, you should value everyone and everything the same.
Well, that's not really possible, and that would be immoral. But anyway, so these were your 2 questions, and another one was about her parents. Yeah, well, she couldn't know what happened to her parents. Like she couldn't get information what happened. But actually, when you look, there are letters published, I think, between her and her sister, and they had good relations, but she couldn't know what happened to her parents. By the way, I think they died in the 1930s or 40s. I don't remember now. But it's not like she didn't care. It's just, although she doesn't say that you have to care about your parents. It's another thing, right? If someone has horrible parents, it's not their duty to love them. But of course, if they value them, then yeah, they should.
Well, may I comment on this?
Yeah, of course.
As far as I know, I read it, she had attempted to take mother and sisters out of Soviet Union, but it was not possible. And then she was saying, in this case, she was saying that she had no information more. So she didn't say that she don't care.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. It's one of the smears that people use to, like, they are pretending, they're lying, I think, that Rand didn't care about her family. Because in this case, they portrayed her as a not very nice person. Okay, anyone else?
When did she die?
She died in 1982, I think.
19.
In New York City, yeah.
So she could know, it was the latest interview of her, and of course she could get this information.
Well, by then, her parents were long dead, I think.
Yes, but okay, she didn't have information.
I have a question. What is the definition of rational egoism from Rand's perspective?
Rational egoism. So rational egoism, from one perspective, you could think about it in terms of her theory. So it's an ethical theory that claims that what is moral, so egoism, so moral egoism as such is a philosophical theory, a moral theory that says that what is moral is good for you. But moral egoism itself doesn't specify what it really means, what your self-interest consists of, and what you should do in order to gain it. And there were some moral egoists in the history of philosophy. Some people would say that Nietzsche, to some extent, Max Stirner, some ancient Greeks, maybe Epicurus. You could also argue that there's some elements of egoism in Aristotle's philosophy, although not explicitly, but as a consequence. Generally, for ancient Greeks, ethics was supposed to be about your flourishing, or your eudaimonia is the word that they used for happiness or flourishing. So again, moral egoism or ethical egoism is a theory that says you should live for yourself. But rational egoism, it's Rand's ethical theory that says the only way to act for yourself is to use your reason, is to act in the long term, is to carefully think about your values and about your life as a whole. So about your material values, about your spiritual values, your emotions as well. Yeah, that's a short answer to that question. I would refer you to the introduction of her collection of essays called The Virtue of Selfishness. So the introduction and the first essay, I think, would be best if you want to, learn further about that.
And the last question.
Of course.
Okay, when someone, young man for example, does not value his own country and someone is threatening freedom of his country, then he doesn't value, so he will not die and even will not fight for it. This is freedom or something to do with morality?
If he chooses not to fight?
Not to fight. Okay, someone is coming to take my country and to fight against my country. I'm a young man, full of power, but I don't want to fight because I don't value my country. Is it freedom or something to do with moral?
Well, no, it's both. It's both. So here's the thing. In a free society, you would be free to pursue drugs, to take drugs, to sell drugs. It doesn't mean that it's moral. It doesn't mean that it's moral. In a free country, and unfortunately it's not always happening between you and me, I don't think that Zawinski's decision to not let young men from 18 to 60 years old, they made this decision not to let them out. I don't think it was moral. But anyway, so politically they should be free to leave the country or just not fight. Now, there's the question of morality. If it's that he really doesn't value that country, because if that's the case, then you could ask, but why doesn't he value it? Does he have rational grounds for not valuing it? And maybe he does. But regardless, he should be free to leave. Now, it could be immoral if he valued his country, but he didn't fight because of cowardice, right? Because he was not brave enough. So he didn't fight for his values. That would be immoral because that would be fighting against his old values and ultimately his...
He does not value freedom of his own country then?
Yeah, then it's not immoral. Like, if I don't value some guy on the street and...
Not some guy, my own country.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. It's not that we are... Yeah. So the thing is, we are not prisoners of the geographical area that we happened to be born in. So I'm not. So for example, I would not fight for Poland unless I saw Russian tanks on my street. Then yeah, I would have no choice. But I don't value Poland. Just between you and us, you and me, I don't value it.
Yes, this is a rhetoric question. Freedom or morality? It's not like there's clash. It's not like there's clash. You need political freedom in order for people to be able to pursue their goals. And one of their goals might be to live in a peaceful country. And sometimes it means that that person has to leave. So let's say there's some Ukrainian guy. There are a lot of Ukrainian refugees now in Georgia, now in Poland. We have I think millions of them. And maybe some of them do not have anyone in Ukraine that they value, that they love. Or maybe even I know a girl who moved to Poland. Her whole city was destroyed. I think she was from Mariupol. So you know what happened to Mariupol, right? And I don't know if she's a patriot or not, but she left. And I think there's nothing left for her in Ukraine. So it really depends on your values. But it's not like you are born with a duty to fight for your country only because you were born in that country. Yes, sometimes duty is very connected to morality.
No. There's a lot of philosophers who say that morality is about duty, but it's not Rand's perspective. There's an essay in her collection, Philosophy Who Needs It. The essay is called Causality versus Duty. Let me actually write that down. Causality versus duty. It's the name of the essay in which she analyzes and criticizes the very concept of duty. And it's in Philosophy Who Needs It, which is being translated to Georgian, right? Philosophy Who Needs It. Yep. So this is the collection of essays, and it's one of the essays. Any other questions? Don't be shy.
Just for information.
Yeah.
We have a library here in this building, room number 228. We have almost all those books of Ayn Rand there. You're welcome to come and check. Maybe we have some extra. We have some Georgian and English versions.
Ayn Rand?
Yeah, lots of them.
I have read Ayn Rand.
So when we finish, I can invite you.
Thank you.
Is there something you don't agree with Ayn Rand?
Oh yeah. So, well, there's an important distinction. So, the thing is, Ayn Rand created something that is called objectivism. This circle represents her system. It's called objectivism. Sorry about my handwriting, I know it's terrible. It says objectivism, right? This is her philosophical theory, right? And I agree with that system. I agree with the fundamentals. I agree with the applications. But her views are much broader than that. And so for example, so this is the, so let's say actually this is objectivism. And this is, oh, sorry. Just 1 second, sorry. This is objectivism, her theory, her system, and this is her views, so it's broader than just objectivism. And so, for example, Rand had specific views on femininity and masculinity. For example, that it's natural for women to look up to men. She didn't mean that women are worse intellectually or morally, but it's that it's in their psyche to look up to men. Yeah. And that, of course, has some implications, like she wasn't sure about homosexuality. So it's another issue that I disagree with her on. But these are outside her philosophy. These were some of her views on psychology. So yeah, so I don't agree with those views. I might also not agree with, like, she talked about art a lot. And while I agree with her view of art in general, I don't necessarily have the same taste as she did. Like, she didn't like Wagner, and my wife also doesn't like him. But I love Wagner. What can I tell you? I just love him. So yeah. But in terms of philosophy, no, I've been studying it for 4 years. It's if I ever find something that I disagree with, I will see why I disagree with it, and then probably it would mean that I would have to disagree with something more fundamental in her philosophy, which would mean that probably I didn't understand something.
I, for example, have issued the way she spoke. Like,
Okay.
like there's a lot of videos of her speaking, and it's very aggressive, and sometimes it misinterprets her message.
I see. Well, but it's not philosophy, right? It's one thing. One thing is the content, another is the way you speak. I could deliver another talk on Kantian ethics, which I wholeheartedly reject, with the same voice, the same tone. And even though I guess I hope I sound friendly, it wouldn't mean anything about the content, because regardless of the style, I'm either wrong or right. But yeah, I myself don't find her very aggressive, but I understand that some people had that. But you know, another thing is that she would be very engaged in interviews, and part of it, I mean, the main part of it, was because she really cared about ideas. She really cared about the world. And if you care about something, then you are usually emotionally engaged with it.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's why I made he's a similar. I made similarities between him and Trump once. President Trump. Because
That's insulting.
I know.
That's his freedom.
Yeah. But
Yeah, of course, yeah.
he does same thing. He means different thing, but when
Yeah, but I don't think that he cares about the world and ideas.
Yeah,
I think he's a scumbag, so...
yeah, but I mean his message is different, but his meaning and his presentation is different as well. That's why I.
Oh, I see,
Yeah.
okay. Okay.
You might mean one thing, but if you present it wrongly, then people will understand it wrongly, and you
Yeah.
will get a different message.
Yeah, you might want to check other interviews. So, like, for example, there's an interview with Rand and Mike Wallace. It's a great interview. She doesn't sound aggressive at all. Yeah. Yeah, but I know that she was a very emotional person, but I actually like it. So, please.
I want to ask you about the nature, real nature of altruistic and sacrificial ideologies. We know that there's like rational, moral self-interest, and there's immoral, irrational self-interest.
Mm-hmm.
That is basically aims to get benefit by harming other people,
Yeah.
lying to other people. So don't you think that altruistic ideologies in their nature are by people who want to benefit by someone else, rather than because they're asking someone else to sacrifice, someone else to provide for them. And it's mostly done by people who are very dishonest. All the leaders, they're always fragile, and then they find out that they're actually never honest about their ideas. So there's basically altruism is kind of like self-interest, but mostly more self-interest.
I see. Okay, that's an interesting perspective. I would say that it's true that inherent in the ethics of self-sacrifice is that you are also, that is why Rand thinks that collectivism, political collectivism, is really based on altruism. Because in altruism, the idea is not only that you should sacrifice yourself, but it's always with sacrificing other people as well. But I wouldn't say that everyone who believes that altruism is morally good are doing that because they want to use other people. I think there are genuine altruists. I actually know such people who do that and don't expect other people to do that. So, but I think that you are right to the extent that there are such people who use Adolf Hitler was an altruist. Yes, he was. Because he was thinking that he can sacrifice other people for some greater cause, right? And so he was using other people, of course. But again, there are people who are genuine altruists who maybe even very often believe that maybe we can use force to sacrifice others, and I think you can see that in welfare statism and stuff, and obviously in communism. All communists, even those who want to sacrifice themselves first, will always use other people as well. But again, I would say that there are genuine people who are altruists who don't sacrifice other people, even if they believe that those people should sacrifice themselves.
Okay, we can just not to use the verb sacrifice, but just helping other people, it's helping nothing.
So, yeah. So the thing is that we shouldn't conflate, we shouldn't mistake altruism for benevolence. So benevolence is goodwill towards people. So Ayn Rand, in one of her essays, claims that what should our approach be to strangers on the streets? No, she said, you should assume that they are of potential value to your life, right? So a rational egoist recognizes that other people can be of great value. And but benevolence itself is not something irrational. So let's say that I have a close friend, and let's say that he is in a financial trouble, and so he needs some money, and he asks me for that money. But at the same time, I want to buy a watch for myself. Now, if he's really a value for me, I will not choose the watch. I will choose helping my friend. Why? Because he's my friend, because I value him. And if I buy the watch instead, he was not really my friend, was he? So for altruism, you should sacrifice yourself, what's important for you, to other people. So you should give up what's more important for what's less important for you, for your life. And there are people who do that.
Yes, and they're more kinder and more sympathetic than Ayn Rand. Something.
Well, I've
Okay, everything is subjective, of course.
I haven't met her, but from what I know from people who actually were her friends, they always say that she was very kind and actually cute. There's a book. It's called Facets of Ayn Rand. Facets of Ayn Rand. And there are a lot of stories of was her an employee for some time, then their relationship would develop into friendship, and there are a lot of very cute stories about Rand herself.
What was her position on religion? Because for some people, religion is such a motivation of doing good, of being moral.
Yeah, well,
What did she say about religion?
for Rand, religion is, she understood the necessity of religion in primitive cultures in the sense that, in the past, in the sense that for Rand, philosophy is necessary. We need philosophy because we need guidance. We need to know where we live, what is the nature of the world. We need to know how we can gain knowledge about the world, and we need to know how to act, which is ethics. So, and religion is something that offers that has been offering that for thousands of years. But the problem with religion is that it's faith-based. It's based on faith, on accepting something that either has no basis in reality or contradicts it. And that is why we need philosophy, a rational endeavor to know what the world is, to know how we can gain knowledge in religion. Knowledge is given usually by revelation or by priests or other higher-ups. And so we need philosophy. We need philosophy for ethics as well. And so obviously, Rand was against religion in the sense that it's not good for people ultimately. It's not good in the long term. And usually in religion, religious morality is almost always, if not always, altruism of some sort.
But when you say religion isn't good, then why is it that in economics, when you buy an insurance policy, you pay less prime if you're religious?
I don't know.
Because you have a more stable perspective in life, you have more faith in what's going on. So economic world sees being religious as something, as a stable factor, as a positive factor. So how do you explain that?
Well, it must be a cultural issue. I don't think that's true in Poland. Maybe is that true in Georgia? In Netherlands? In Netherlands. So it's probably because culturally religious people in the Netherlands probably they're Protestants. So they usually have...
All of them, half are Catholics.
Okay, sure. But still, I think their work ethics is probably bigger, and that's why. But it's not a good argument in favor of faith or religion itself, right? Because you can have religious people. Let's, try giving insurance to Islamic terrorists.
that wouldn't be wise, would it? But they are very religious. So I wouldn't say it's an argument for religion. So yeah.
Yeah, dear friends, we have pizzas ready arrived. So all of you are invited to our room, 328. So we can continue in informal way.
Yeah.
Okay, and we have another part of our activity. So we'll do it now. Okay. Let's come.
Now we have the inauguration.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Good.
So please join us.
Thank you.
I don't know this, right?